Eagle Hollow, Texas, spring of 1885, lay beneath a sky the color of tarnished silver. Dust hung low over the flatlands and the wind whistled through leaning fences like it remembered something terrible. On the porch of the sheriff's office, a group of men laughed hard enough to cough up dust. "He paid a whole dollar for it," one of them shouted. Laughter followed like gunfire. Wyatt Harmon didn't look back. He didn't need to. He'd heard that kind of laugh before, in uniform in saloons in his own damn head during the darkest nights. The kind that said you were either too brave or too broken to be understood. A barn. That was the joke. An abandoned, rat-eaten, half-collapsed barn on the south edge of town. It hadn't stored anything but shadows in 3 years, ever since the previous owner rode west and never came back. It leaned crooked like it had secrets in its bones. He bought it for $1 at auction, while the town watched and snickered. But Wyatt didn't buy it for animals or grain. He bought it because it felt like the only place in Eagle Hollow that wasn't pretending. And because something about it, something quiet, had drawn him in like a whisper. The war had left him with a limp and nightmares that wouldn't quit. 10 years away from Eagle Hollow had changed him. The town had forgotten him. The boy who'd apprenticed under old Jenkins, the blacksmith, before enlisting. Now he was just a stranger who'd wasted $1. The outer door of the barn shrieked as he pulled it open. Sunlight sliced through cracks in the warped walls, catching dust in the air like smoke. The place smelled of rust, mold, and underneath it all, something bitter, like old blood and iron. Wyatt stepped carefully across the warped floorboards. Toward the back of the barn, the wood changed. Subtle but sure. 4 planks newer than the rest. Clean edges, different grain, and freshly replaced. He crouched down, ran his calloused fingers along the seams. Someone had recently opened this and sealed it again. He knocked. Thump, solid, thump, solid, thump, then hollow. Wyatt stilled. His breath caught in his throat. He knocked again. Hollow. He pressed his ear against the floor. At first, nothing. Then a sound. A breath. Shallow, ragged, barely there. And then scratching, fingernails on wood, slow, measured, not panicked, just trying to be heard. Wyatt's spine went rigid. He stood, pulled the pry bar from his satchel, and slid it beneath the trapdoor's edge. The locks, 2 of them, thick and unmarked, weren't rusted at all. They didn't belong to a place this forgotten. That alone made his skin prickle. He wedged the bar in deeper and heaved. Wood splintered. Metal groaned. One lock snapped, the other held. Another sound came from below, whimpering. Wyatt's heart beat hard against his ribs. He gritted his teeth and pushed again. The second lock gave way with a screech. He lifted the trap door slowly. The hinges groaned, and a cold, damp draft rose to meet him. He lit his oil lamp and lowered it down into the dark. At first only shadows, then metal chains, then eyes. She moved before he had time to think. A woman launched from the darkness, dragging a length of chain still clasped around one wrist. Her other arm swept something, her child behind her, as she rose like a feral spirit from a nightmare. Her face was dirt-streaked, sunken, jaw clenched with fury and fear. She raised the broken chain like a weapon and screamed, "Stay back!" Wyatt didn't reach for the gun at his hip, didn't raise his hands. He did the one thing no one in that town would have expected. He sank slowly to his knees, lowered the lamp beside him, and said nothing. Then he held out one hand, palm up, unarmed, unmoving. The chain in her grip trembled. "I didn't buy this barn to store anything," Wyatt said quietly. "I bought it to save someone. I just didn't know who yet." The silence that followed was louder than any gunshot. Wyatt's cabin sat just beyond the reach of the town's gossip and smoke. A 2-room shack with a stove that creaked like old bones, and a cot that had not known a woman's touch in years. Now it held something far more fragile than solitude. Charlotte Miller lay on that cot, her wrists bruised, her face pale with exhaustion. Next to her, curled under a thick wool blanket, was her son Billy, just 5 years old, thin as a whip, silent as a stone. He had not spoken since Wyatt carried him out of that basement. They had slept nearly 24 hours. Now Charlotte was awake, propped against the wooden wall, her eyes flickering across the room, as if she still expected chains to snap shut at any moment. Wyatt handed her a cup of water and a piece of bread. She took both with trembling hands but did not speak. Not yet. He did not press. Outside, the wind scraped dust against the window. The barn sat quiet across the rise, but Wyatt's mind hadn't stopped since the moment he saw her eyes in the dark. The marks, the chains, the smell. That place was not just forgotten. It was used, recently, repeatedly, and he needed to know for what. Charlotte finally broke the silence. Her voice was dry, broken, like it hadn't been used in days. "You the one who opened the door?" Wyatt nodded. She stared at him for a long moment, as if weighing the cost of the truth. "I thought I was going to die in there," she said. Wyatt sat in the chair across from her, elbows on knees, silent. Charlotte sipped the water, eyes never leaving his. "They took us on the road between Cross Bend and here," she continued. "Said they were taking us to work on a ranch near the border. Seemed decent at first. One man even had a badge on his belt." Wyatt's jaw tightened. Didn't take long to realize there was no ranch, just a wagon with locked doors and no windows. They had 4 other girls already, all younger, all scared out of their minds. She paused, looked at Billy, who slept soundly beside her. "They moved us at night, stopped once for food, then nothing. We got to that barn 4 days ago, maybe 5. They dragged us into that hole like livestock." "How many were there?" Wyatt asked quietly. 5 men. 3 I saw. One ran the others. Tall, spoke slow, like he was smarter than the rest. Always smoked a cigar with cloves in it. "That's how you knew he was coming." Charlotte's voice remained steady despite the horror in her words. "They kept us in cages, metal pens like for dogs. They had ropes and a stick with hooks on it. Used it when one of the girls tried to run. Took her out bleeding. She never came back." Her throat worked as she swallowed hard. "They took 2 girls the second night. A wagon came. No lights, just a knock on the trap door. One by one, they led them out like it was nothing." "And you?" Wyatt asked. Charlotte looked away. "I had Billy. They didn't like that. Said kids were trouble. Said I was too loud, too angry. Said I was going to wait till he came." Wyatt frowned. "He?" She nodded slowly. "The man who pays the most. They said he liked women who didn't break easy. Liked making them break himself." Wyatt leaned back slowly in his chair, the weight of what she said anchoring in his chest. She looked back at him. "You believe me?" He nodded without hesitation. "I believe every damn word." A long silence passed. Then quietly Charlotte added, "There were names scratched into the wall. Dozens, some with dates. I think, I think it's been going on longer than anyone knows." Wyatt stood and paced. The room was suddenly too small, the air too tight. "You saw their faces?" "2 of them. One had a star tattoo on his neck. The other wore a preacher's coat but cussed like a miner. I don't know their names." "That's enough," Wyatt said. She raised her brow. "Enough for what?" He turned toward the door. "To start digging." Back at the barn, Wyatt inspected every inch of the cellar with Charlotte's voice in his ears. The cages were real. The chains, the ropes, the marks on the floor, all of it. Vials in a corner, torn scraps of women's clothing, a ledger half burned but not entirely gone, and a smell he would never forget. He stood over that space, fists clenched. This was not just a crime. It was a system, and it had roots right here in the bones of Eagle Hollow. The Eagle Hollow Sheriff's Office was housed in a brick building that looked more like a dry goods store than a place of justice. A rusting sign hung above the door, swinging in the breeze like it too had grown tired of pretending. Sheriff Thomas Drake looked up from behind his desk, tall, square-jawed, with eyes that scanned like a rifle scope. His badge gleamed, but there was dust on the edges of his boots. "Mornin'," he said. "You look like you seen a ghost." Wyatt stepped forward, voice steady. "I found something under the old Maddox barn." Drake leaned back in his chair. "That's so," Wyatt nodded. "Chains, cages, blood. A woman and her child locked down there. Alive." Drake's smile didn't falter, but something flickered in his eyes. Charlotte stepped forward, her voice low but clear. "We weren't the first. There were others before me. Girls. They were taken." Billy buried his face in Wyatt's shoulder. Drake's smile faded. "This town's got enough problems without folks stirring up ghost stories." "It's not a story," Wyatt said, voice harder now. "You want to see the bruises, the rusted locks, the half-burned ledger?" Drake stood slowly, brushing imaginary dust off his shirt. "Mr. Harmon, I respect what you're trying to do, but sometimes poking into the past only invites more trouble. That barn's been empty for years. Ain't nobody seen anything suspicious." Charlotte stared at him. Something in her face shifted. Then quietly, "You were there." Drake froze. Her voice was cold, still. "The second night, you drove the wagon. You wore gloves. Your hat sat low, but I saw your face in the lamplight when you passed me to the next man. I remember your voice." The room went still. Wyatt didn't move. Drake's hand twitched near his belt, but not for the gun, just enough to remind them it was there. "I think you're confused," Drake said evenly. "Stress can do strange things to memory. You were in a rough spot, ma'am. Maybe you dreamed it." "I didn't." The silence was thick. Then Drake spoke again, softer, as if offering a compromise. "This town runs on stability. The church, the ranches, the supply lines, all depend on peace. You go spreading rumors about kidnapping, rings, and sheriff involvement, people panic, prices drop, investors pull out, families lose work. We can't have that, can we?" Wyatt took a step forward. "You're saying it's better to let it continue?" Drake's eyes met his. "I'm saying some truths do more damage than good. If someone's been using that barn for bad business, well, that's unfortunate. But there's no hard evidence. Not unless you want to make yourself a target." "I don't scare easy," Wyatt said. Drake's voice turned sharp. "No, but the people around you might. Women, children. You bring the wrong kind of attention to this, and someone else ends up in a hole." The unspoken threat settled heavy. Charlotte looked at Wyatt. Wyatt looked at Billy, then back at Drake. "This ain't over," Wyatt said, voice low. "I reckon it is," Drake replied. As they turned to leave, Drake added casually, "Best you put that girl on a train out of here. New faces stir up old stories. Let the dust settle, Harmon." But Wyatt didn't answer. Back outside, the sky was high and harsh. Charlotte's legs almost gave beneath her, but Wyatt caught her before she fell. "That was him," she whispered. "It was him. I knew it." Wyatt nodded. "I believe you." She looked at him. "Now what?" He didn't speak for a long moment. Then finally, "Now we stop pretending Eagle Hollow's clean. Now we show the filth to the light." She stared at him, trembling, but in her eyes, just for a second, there was fire. For 7 days, Wyatt became a shadow himself. He watched Drake's movements, followed the money, asked quiet questions in places where whiskey loosened tongues. The story unfolded piece by jagged piece. 5 years ago, Sheriff Drake had been a different man, honest, respected. Then his wife Ellen fell ill with consumption. The town doctor, a hard businessman, demanded payment Drake couldn't provide. She died slowly, painfully, while Drake watched helpless against the cruel mathematics of medicine. A month later, Drake arrested a man named Victor Blackwood for bank robbery. But instead of hanging, Blackwood walked free, and Drake suddenly had money for a new horse, new boots, and a silver watch chain. The timing wasn't coincidence. Drake had chosen power over justice, striking a devil's bargain with Blackwood, who owned half the saloons and shipping businesses along the trade route. The tall man who smoked expensive cigars with cloves. "He saved my life once," an old ranch hand told Wyatt over whiskey. "Drake, I mean, pulled me from a fire, carried me half a mile with burns all over his arms. That man had goodness in him. Something must have broken him deep." Wyatt tracked shipments, followed wagons at night, discovered the White House, a storage facility at the edge of town that received special cargo every third Wednesday. But as he got closer to the truth, the danger grew. One night while watching the White House, Wyatt encountered a man in a preacher's coat with a miner's vocabulary. Reverend Powell. Instead of a Bible, Powell carried a knife. And instead of salvation, he brought darkness. "Brother Harmon," Powell said, stepping from the shadows, "heard you're asking questions about missing lambs." "Just looking for strays," Wyatt replied, hand drifting toward his gun. But Powell wasn't alone. The blow came from behind. Quick, brutal, efficient. The world went black, and Wyatt woke to the taste of blood and the smell of damp earth. They'd beaten him savagely, broken 2 ribs, and left him for dead in a ditch outside town. But they'd underestimated him. The war had taught Wyatt how to crawl through mud when half dead. By dawn, he'd made it back to his cabin, where Charlotte found him collapsed on the porch. She cleaned his wounds with shaking hands but steady eyes. "They'll kill you next time," she whispered. Wyatt coughed, tasting copper. "Only if they catch me." Charlotte helped him inside. "We need to run. Take Billy and go somewhere they can't find us." "And let them keep taking girls?" Wyatt's voice was a rasp. "How many more Elizas will they chain in the dark while we hide?" Charlotte stilled at the name. "How did you—" "I found a ribbon, red, tied to one of the cage bars, and a letter E carved into the wood. I figured it was the girl you mentioned, the one who disappeared." Charlotte's eyes filled. She was so young, 16 maybe, kept talking about her aunt in Eagle Hollow, how she was coming to live with her after her parents died. Wyatt closed his eyes. "This ends. Now." Charlotte stared at him. "How?" "You can barely stand." He opened his eyes, reached for her hand. "Not just me. Us." The White House looked dead in the dark. Just another rotting shell on the edge of Eagle Hollow, where shadows clung tighter than justice. But inside, the air breathed differently. Tonight, Wyatt crouched in the brush 50 paces from the side entrance, flanked by 2 blacksmiths and a farmhand named Ellis, who owed him a debt older than law. Their hammers had been dulled to look like tools, not weapons, but the weight behind them hadn't changed. From the front, Charlotte walked alone. Her hands were bound loosely behind her back with twine she could snap in seconds. She had dusted her dress to look like she'd been wandering, begging, her hair tied down to hide the fire in her eyes. The guard at the door squinted, then leaned forward. "Well, I'll be," he muttered. "The runaway doves come fluttering back." Charlotte dropped to her knees. "Got nowhere else," she whispered. "You said he'd pay more for girls who didn't fight. I can be quiet now." The man snorted. "I doubt it, but quiet don't matter for long. Wagon's coming soon." He opened the door. Charlotte hesitated. He grabbed her elbow roughly. "Too late for second thoughts, sweetheart." But Charlotte didn't resist. She stepped inside the warehouse and passed him just long enough to slide the knife from his hip. Outside, Wyatt saw the signal, a flicker from the upper window. Once, twice, hold. He nodded. They moved. The side door came off with a push and a groan of rusted hinges. Inside, the smell hit first. Sweat, blood, oil. The trap was sprung fast. Ellis took the first man clean with the butt of a hammer. Wyatt moved straight to the back, toward the metal cages. He knew the sound of fear now. It rang like a cracked bell. 3 girls, barely older than children, huddled in one cage. One of them slumped against the bars, burning with fever. Her lips moved without sound. "Get them out!" Charlotte shouted. She held the guard's knife now, blood on her wrist where rope had bitten earlier. Wyatt tore at the cage's bolt. It was newer than the others. He glanced around for something, anything, then slammed his shoulder into the lock. It gave with a crack and a flare of pain through his wounded side, but the door swung open, then chaos from the upper loft. 2 more men jumped down. One lunged at Charlotte. She ducked and drove her blade upward. Another scrambled toward the door, trying to call for help. Wyatt tackled him mid-step. Then Charlotte's scream cut through everything. "Billy!" Wyatt spun around. A man had emerged from a back room, Billy struggling in his grip. The boy kicked and thrashed, but the man held him tight, a knife glinting at his throat. "Back off," the man growled, "or the kid gets it." Wyatt didn't think. He dropped everything and charged. The blade flashed. Pain tore through his shoulder. Still, he didn't stop. He slammed into the man, arms wrapping around Billy and twisting the attacker's wrist with everything he had. They fell in a heap, Billy screaming, Wyatt bleeding, the attacker cursing. The knife clattered across the floor. Before the man could reach it, Charlotte was there. She had picked up a length of chain. With a scream that ripped from her throat, she swung it wide, full arc. The steel struck the man's back with a crunch. He fell, stunned. Charlotte didn't stop. She struck again, then dropped the chain, panting. Wyatt rolled to his knees, still holding Billy. The boy clutched him, shaking. "It's okay," Wyatt whispered. "You're okay. I got you." Behind them, the fire in Charlotte's eyes burned. But it wasn't vengeance anymore. It was resolve. The chain still hung in her hand, dripping red. The woman who once wore it had broken its power. Morning came with a stillness too sharp to be peace. It was the quiet of breath held, of truth walking through a door it had been locked behind for too long. At the center of Eagle Hollow's town square, Wyatt stood on the old well platform, his shirt still blood-stained, shoulder wrapped in bandage. Beside him stood Charlotte, her eyes steady but face pale, clutching the leather-bound notebook. The townspeople gathered slowly, whispering. Wyatt raised his voice, not loud but unshaking. "This town laughs at ghosts, pretends evil only rides from outside. But it has been riding under our boots the whole time." He held up the notebook. "And here are the names of girls taken, what they wore, what they said before they were dragged into chains, written by someone who survived it." Charlotte stepped forward, opened to a page, and read. Eliza had a red ribbon in her hair. She said she liked horses. On the 3rd night they took her. I heard her scream once. Then nothing. Eliza screamed. Silence. Then Wyatt laid out the second piece, a sketch he'd made with measurements detailing the basement, every cage, every shackle. "We broke into that place last night," he said. 3 more girls were about to be loaded onto a wagon. One of them had a fever of 104. Another hadn't eaten in 3 days. And Billy, he paused, looking at the boy in the crowd. Billy was nearly taken again. He turned to the sheriff's office. "Drake, come out here." The door creaked open. Sheriff Thomas Drake stepped out, hat in hand, face unreadable. "You making accusations now, Harmon?" "I'm laying down evidence." Charlotte stepped forward again, her voice clear now. "You remember me, Sheriff? You helped load us in Sweetwater. You said I'd get a job in Waco. You looked right at me." Drake's jaw clenched. "Ma'am, that's a serious..." Do you remember the necklace I wore? She interrupted. Silver cross. My husband gave it to me before he died. I begged you not to take it. You told me pretty things make you weak. Gasped in the crowd. An old woman stepped forward, clutching a photograph. My niece vanished on the road to San Angelo 2 years ago. Her name was Eliza. She had a red ribbon. Others murmured. One by one, voices rose. Stories of sisters, cousins, daughters. Too many gone, too long ignored. Wyatt turned to the mayor. You want to pretend this town's clean, or do you want to take out the garbage in broad daylight? The mayor, a man with more sense than courage, looked at the growing fury in the square and nodded to the deputy. Arrest him! Drake went for his gun. Wyatt was faster. He didn't draw. He just stepped forward and punched the sheriff so hard his knees buckled. The deputy cuffed Drake while he was still dazed. By sunset, Victor Blackwood was in custody too, found trying to flee on the eastbound train. Reverend Powell and 2 men from the shipping yard were arrested within hours. The evidence from the White House and the barn cellar was irrefutable. Ledgers, personal effects, chains that matched the marks on women's wrists. In the jail cell, Drake sat with his head in his hands. When Wyatt came to see him, the fallen sheriff looked up with hollow eyes. Ellen was dying, he whispered. Doctor wanted $500 I didn't have. Blackwood offered me $1,000 to look the other way on a shipment. Just once, I told myself. Just to save her. He laughed, a sound like breaking glass. But she died anyway, and Blackwood owned me by then. Said he'd tell everyone what I'd done. So you kept going, Wyatt said. Kept sending him girls. Drake nodded, tears tracking through the grime on his face. You know the worst part? After a while, I stopped seeing them as people. They became cargo. He looked up at Wyatt. You'll never let me forget that, will you? No, Wyatt said, and neither will they. 3 weeks later, Blackwood stood trial in Austin. The testimony of 17 women, including Charlotte, sent him to the gallows. Drake received 20 years of hard labor. Reverend Powell confessed to everything, traded names for a reduced sentence, and revealed a network that stretched across 3 states. The shadow had been dragged into the light. 6 months later, the barn, once filled with chains, had become something else entirely. Sunlight warmed its whitewashed walls. The sign above the door had been repainted but still read the same. The Eagle Hollow Haven. The transformation hadn't been easy. The town was split. Some wanted to burn the place down, erase the memory. Others, led by Wyatt and Charlotte, insisted on reclaiming it. Evil thrives when good people look away, Charlotte had told the town council. We won't look away anymore. Inside, children laughed over their lessons, while women chopped vegetables for supper or helped each other sew, mend, build. The place buzzed, not with fear or command, but with the hum of life being rebuilt. Charlotte walked through the halls with calm steps and sure hands. People listened when she spoke. She had earned that. Behind the barn, Wyatt stood in front of his forge, sleeves rolled, sweat streaking his neck as he hammered a bent stirrup back into shape. A few young boys watched with quiet admiration. He showed one how to hold the tongs steady, how not to flinch from heat. This was their rhythm now, day after day, working side by side. Charlotte managed the haven. Wyatt trained, built, fixed. They rarely spoke of the past, not out of avoidance, but because they no longer had to. Yet some things still remained unsaid. One evening, as the last light of the sun dipped over the ridge, Wyatt stayed behind to finish reshoeing a horse. The air smelled like warm iron and hay. Charlotte stepped out from the side door, 2 mugs in her hand. You always forget to stop, she said. Wyatt wiped his brow with a rag. The horse won't wait till morning. She handed him the mug. Strong black coffee, the way he liked it. Then from the pocket of her apron, she pulled out something else, an old weathered notebook. He recognized it immediately. She opened it slowly, flipping past the earlier pages filled with jagged, trembling handwriting. Her testimony, her truth. Finally, she reached the last page. She handed it to him, hesitated, then watched as he read. If you hadn't appeared in that cellar, I'd have had nothing left to write. If you hadn't laid down your knife, I'd never have believed again. And if you hadn't taught me to be brave, I'd never have dared to love again. Wyatt lowered the notebook slowly, eyes shining beneath the brim of his hat. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then he looked up at her. He stepped closer, carefully, deliberately, took her hand. Not quickly, not hungrily, but with a quiet certainty. You don't need to write another word, he said, voice rough and steady. I'll live the rest of it with you. Charlotte didn't answer with words. She stepped into his arms, rested her forehead against his shoulder. No more chains, no more running. Just two people, once broken, now whole, beneath a sky that no longer felt too wide. From inside the barn, Billy's laughter echoed as he chased after the other children. Wyatt and Charlotte turned to watch him, smiling. Above them, the old barn's porch light flickered on. No longer a warning, but a welcome. And in the distance from the town that had once turned its back, lights began to flicker too, one by one, as more and more people began to believe in something better. Justice had come, love had stayed, and hope had finally found a home. In that place, once bought for $1 and a dream, they had found something beyond price: redemption.